So you started in an RV on the road. You spent 2.5 years traveling the country.
Yep.
And you shared a lot of those stories through your blog at danceswithwinnebagos.com. Awesome stories about burning up brakes and tunnels.
Oh my God. Tim writes the best stories. He comes up with the stuff that, I write all the boring stuff and everything.
Well, you've written some pretty interesting stuff about things a lot of us didn't think about before going full-time. So Sherry and I have only been full-time for 3 months, going up 4 months now.
Yeah.
Our good experiences have largely been because we've followed people like you and Stacia and others who have been on the road, and we've learned from that. So after your 2.5 years on the road, you toured the country and you decided to come here to Portland.
We had already decided on Portland or really Gig Harbor. Those were the two towns we really liked. But, decided I wanted a floating home. I mean, we were 2 months into the trip, as Tim told you. I mean, we were 2 months in. He's like, we just bought the RV. So it was not happening. He's like, can we still go on the trip? Absolutely. Let's go on the trip, go around the U.S. But the further we got into, the South, the further we got into the East, I wanted to go back to the Pacific Northwest, and he agreed. We both agreed as we were talking that we liked the Pacific Northwest. That was it.
Awesome.
And that I wanted a floating home was just final. And then when I told Tim he could have a boat if I got the floating home, that sealed the deal.
All right. So it was a negotiation.
Not much of a negotiation with Tim. Yeah. Usually he just does whatever I say, which is good. Yes.
That's the balance of a good relationship.
I'm an oldest child. He's a middle child. So, the middle child just does what the oldest child says. It works out. So I have that strange history of I got my Oracle certification after being a desktop support person.
Mm-hmm.
They sent me for my Oracle certification. I'd never been on a desktop or any database before. Got on a database, they gave it to me. They assigned it for my first job as a junior DBA, and it was a SQL Server 7. Okay, 7 terabyte one, in fact.
Okay.
And so I had to
SQL Server 7, that would be circa 1998, 1999-ish?
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. And then I got some Oracle databases on Windows, Sybase. I was getting everything. I just got tons of experience during that time. I mean, I was working on tons of different databases, Informix, Ingress. I mean, you named it. Within my first 4 years, I was on it. But I didn't want to choose. I was told I needed to specialize. But I wasn't comfortable in doing that. It may be my ADHD brain. I wanted interesting things to do.
Mm-hmm.
And by doing more and having a huge workload, I was happiest. So I continued to work on all these areas. And what happened is, of course, I met Tim at that point. He was my first mentor. The first lead DBA I worked with was kind of a bully.
You're talking about Tim Gorman, who's now your husband?
Now my husband. But this was way before. We both were married back then. And he just remembered that I was very technically skilled. And he told my boss, who had told him that I was going on to a PM position, you shouldn't let her become a project manager. She should stay a DBA.
Yeah.
And so he brought me back into the database administration team. And I was aware that he was, part of the community. RMUG. I had never really attended RMUG. This is the first time I had found out about it, and I went to my first conference, training days, and I became very enthralled with this community, the Oracle community. So from there, I went from being part of the community to being part of the board for the user group. Learned about the ACE program, which is the MVP version on the Oracle side, became an ACE, then an ACE director. And at that point, I also was still investing in my SQL Server knowledge. I had written my first SQL Server book, which was SQL Server 2012 Pro Practices with Bradley Ball. Who else was on that? I'll remember all their names later on at like 3 a.m. in the morning.
I'm the same way.
But we wrote this book, and so I started looking at the SQL Server community. And I went to my first SQL Saturday in Denver, and I remember walking in, and I was used to 7% women. That's about how much we had, at any of these events. And I walked into SQL Saturday Denver, and there was 40% women in attendance. And I'm looking around going, where did you get them? Where did you get them all? And I was utterly amazed. And I met Jen and Sean McGowan,
Okay.
and started talking to them and found out all about how they handle WIT. And I was utterly
Women in
amazed.
Technology, which
Yeah.
part of the SQL Server community.
Because they were saying the things that I've been trying to promote in the Oracle community I was being told I was doing it all wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Microsoft's been doing it like this for a while now. And they're doing well, obviously.
So why do you think that there was such a difference? So you said there were 40% women in the audience at a Microsoft event, compared to such a small number at an Oracle event.
In technology, it's not about big hits. For women in tech, it's about the death by 1,000 pinpricks.
Okay.
And the way that you address those pinpricks is by having real conversations, having support, having allies, having sponsorship. And in the Microsoft community, they were having that conversation. In the Oracle community, they weren't.
Sure.
I was just starting to
and was a lot of this driven by the PASS organization, the Professional Association for SQL Server?
Absolutely was.
Okay.
And I don't know the history to say, was Microsoft doing this as well at that time?
Yeah.
I can't tell you that, because I came into the Microsoft side by going into PASS first and then going over to Microsoft.
Okay.
So that's how I was introduced. But I was coming up on my Microsoft MVP. And I was offered the job at Microsoft. That's why I was never an MVP.
I see. Okay. And a lot of people don't know that you can't be an MVP if you're a Microsoft
Exactly.
employee. If you have a blue badge, then that's kind of
Yes.
your commitment to the
They
community.
came to me and said, hey, we've got your MVP sitting here. We need you to fill out this next step. And I'm like, I just accepted a position.
Right.
And afterwards I was told, you stupid idiot, you should have accepted that. So
Well,
I don't know any
working
better.
for
I was too
Microsoft pays
excited.
the bills, though.
Yes, I was too
Yeah.
excited about my new job.
So you've maintained this very interesting balance of focus in your career between being very focused on the Oracle database community as a member of the ACE program and working for Microsoft.
So I had to give up my ACE when I became an Oracle employee.
Oh.
Same thing.
Okay.
Same thing. I am still part of Oak Table, which is a group of Oracle scientists. There's about 100 of those in the world, and that still carries a lot of weight, especially in Europe.
Uh-huh.
If you say Oak Table, everybody knows who it is. The Oak Table folks are usually the ones that everyone stalks on the Oracle side, because in the Microsoft community, there's a lot of sharing of knowledge. In the Oracle community, it's a much smaller group that does. And so if you are sharing that information, I have a lot of individuals that come up to me and go, you were the first person that I could read a blog about that was telling me what I needed to know. You were
Okay.
willing to tell me things that nobody else was. They wanted to make it all this magic and secret, and you were like, this is how it works. This is just how it works.
And that's something that I think we've generally had in the Microsoft community is this idea of sharing, and that we all rise together
Yes.
when we share information, when we help each other out and mentor and work together and collaborate. Do you, as a member of the Oracle database community, has the needle been moved? Has
Absolutely.
it changed? Okay.
Absolutely. I am so proud. I remember that back when I first started with Women in Tech and I was doing all of this, I had a lot of people take me aside and go, you don't need to be talking about this. You don't need to be sharing this knowledge. You don't need to be doing this. It was this exclusive group.
Mm-hmm.
And now you have these allies, people that I'm very proud of, that will come up and say, that was unfair, or this is a biased situation, or women in tech really need our allyship, that we've never done it before, because there is a much higher percentage of men in the industry than women there, and that they are stepping up and realizing that they need to contribute and help and collaborate and sponsor women and get them going is really important. Because when you start looking at the ACE program, last time I checked, it was about 4% women. I mean, it was really, really low. And when I was there, we'd gotten it up to about 11%. I mean, but that was a big fight for us to get it even there. I mean, I was filling out ACE paperwork every week for somebody. Somebody new and saying, you sponsor them. We were splitting it up, trying to get other people to sponsor, so it didn't look like it was, we were trying to build a coup. Somebody was thinking, the women are taking over. No, we were trying to get everybody to kind of split it up and make it look like it was just happening naturally. It was self-sustaining. That's really important. You don't want people to feel like there's something happening that's going to make them feel that, it's becoming oppressed for them. So it was really crucial to try to do that, and it's just not that way anymore. They're realizing the reality of it, that women in tech is just a normal conversation now. Diversity and inclusion is normal. It's not something that you hide, and if you want to be part of the cool group, you don't discuss it.
So I think there are a lot of us in the community, just in the industry, who would really like to believe that these divisions don't matter. That gender shouldn't be a consideration. Race, religion, any of these categories really shouldn't be a factor. With regard to hiring practices and who we promote and who are members of our teams. How do we make that a reality?
Understand that sponsorship is really crucial. Tim and I have a very unique situation where we are not only married in the same technical field, we're in the same team.
Yeah.
We do the same thing. He is in a position higher than me, even though I'm the lead.
So I have to ask, how does that work?
Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
If we talk about income, though, I'm higher than him. And it goes back to the same thing. It's very interesting when you start talking about this. So they were very clear about offering him that, and yet I wasn't able to fight for that one, even though I did. Tried, wasn't able to. So he came up a level higher than me. And a lot of people took that, there was a number of folks at Microsoft said this wasn't right that this happened. At the same time, when I came in under my salary, they came to me and said, are you married to that salary? And I said, I didn't even really think about this. It just came out of my mouth. Best thing I could have ever said. I said, I feel like if I didn't stand up and fight for this, I'd be letting down women in tech everywhere. No one argued with me because they didn't know even what to say. And no one fought it from that point on. Then when I came to this team, the team that Tim and I are on now, they wanted to challenge my salary again at the level I'm at. I really should be a level higher. And my boss at that time said, no, Kellyn earned that pay. He came to my bat. He was my ally. He sponsored me. He took care of me. So you see that. And the way I look at it is, at the end of the day, that's when I come back and say, this is what equality actually means. It's not that you win every battle. It's not that you're ahead in every battle. It's that at the end of the day, Tim and I go, we're equal.
Good.
And I think that's extremely crucial.
Community. So
Yes.
What does that mean? I think it means different things to different people. But put that in 50 words or less.
For me, it has to do with that I have an awesome technical career that I've been able to work from home for the last 13, 14 years, that I was there for my children, that I've been able to put, between Tim and I, 5 children through college without any without any financial debt. Those kind of things not many families can say they can do. So why wouldn't you give back? Why wouldn't you give back to your community? Just like we did, 100 years ago, when you say, I give back to my community, I volunteer in church, I volunteer for government, things like that. You have that capability within your work that you can marry those two and give back to the community.
Okay.
And that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to help out in a field that nobody says I'm going to grow up and be a DBA.
Yeah.
They're not saying that. They often have school systems that aren't able to support the education that we need for the technologists of tomorrow. I'm going to get back to that as well. And that I can come back and say, have you talked to so-and-so? Have you thought about this person here? And bring in other people that you are lifting while you rise, I think is incredibly important, because then again, it's a benefit to me. I'm no longer the only woman at the table.
Yeah, I like that.
I
like that phrase. You're lifting while you rise.
I think I heard it the first time was from Reed. People, folks would come in and go, why is your mentoring doing so much better than other mentoring programs?
Mm-hmm.
I had built these little pods for women in the Oracle side, and I thought it was kind of silly. I was just doing kind of support. Many times these women just come to me and go, today just really sucked. I need to talk to you. And we'd work it through, we'd find what options there were to work through challenges that we suffered. If there was, one of those small pinpricks, that worked through it, and I found that after the 4 years, that 40% of women that were leaving technology because of all those pinpricks, death by 1,000 pinpricks, they weren't leaving. They were overcoming them. And I knew I just didn't know what was different. And what was different for me was that I had those mentors, I had those sponsors, I had that support. And that's what I was offering other women. That was what was important. I enjoy doing things that other people think are kind of crazy. They'll watch me out kayaking. I was out with an RC boat out in the middle of the river the other day on my kayak. Whatever I want to enjoy to do, I'm going to do. that I enjoy going and buying Doc Marten boots.
Yes.
That's something that I enjoy doing. I will go shop.
And you have a great collection of Doc Martens.
I do. You saw those in there, yeah. Those all fit in the RV too. Remember that.
I remember that discussion.
But I was even able to marry, as a child, I didn't have a lot of the technical opportunities that other kids do with toys. They just weren't there, when I was a kid. So I do a lot with Raspberry Pis. And I was talking with your wife, Sherry, about how I knew about Bluehound, that app that talks about beacons.
To
because
track
I
our
had
cats
it on, because I put it on my dog, and I had done a Raspberry Pi, project with it. So I find different things that interest me and just try it out. I joke with my boss all the time that I love my little Nintendo Switch. Why do I love it? Because there is no email on it, there is no Twitter, there is nothing. I go to my island and nobody can bother me on Animal Crossing.
And so you can unplug.
I can. I can, yes. And I tell people that, okay, I'm done with this meeting, I'm going to my island now and you can't come. So I say that even in meetings, they know what it means. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you just answered my next question, and that is, how do you disconnect?
Yeah.
How do you get away from work?
You can go out on that boat right out here in this lovely river, and nobody can follow you there. Nobody can. I think it's important that I have my space. Even when we were in the RV, I made the RV mine. It was really important that it was decorated, that I was comfortable. There weren't a lot of distractions. I love music. I always have my headphones on. I am an ADHD person. I don't like distractions. So if it's not a controlled distraction, which is the music that I know and I love, I am very big about not having a lot of sound, not having a lot of, color. I mean, that stuff is very distracting for me. So I built my space the way that I love it. And I live my life the way that I love it. I don't like being unhappy. I like peace.
Yes.
So I build my peace.
And that's obvious.
Yeah.
In our conversations, you've mentioned ADHD several times.
Yes.
And I gather that you embrace that?
Absolutely embrace it. Much to some of my boss's pain, but yeah.
And I'll just footnote that with as a child, I've never been diagnosed with any kind of condition like that. But I recognize that I have this at least ADD tendency. It's shiny thing, squirrel, and I know it's different.
Yeah. ADHD runs rampant in IT. There's no question about it. I can usually spot them from a mile away. I have 3 kids with ADHD diagnosed. I was professionally diagnosed, all the way through. Some of the tests are pretty funny. If you have these tests like where there's a keyboard that you're hitting keys, and they say you can only hit the key when these letters are come up on the screen, and the other letters you don't want to hit the keys. I will hit the space bar every single time when it says not to. You find out that as the more tedious the task gets, the less focus you have, and your activity levels go down in your temporal lobes, and you can't stop yourself. And you recognize that hyperactivity is really a loss of control. I speak fast because I'm losing self-control. I'm tapping my leg or anything like that when I'm not on ADHD medication. It's a loss of control.
Okay.
Even eating, stress eating, stuff like that is a loss of control.
So the last letter in that abbreviation, disorder.
I don't really believe in it being a disorder, though.
Okay, and that was my question.
Yeah, I think society and certain individuals will make it a disorder. In your brain, you have the ability to harness it and make it dynamic, and that's what I choose to do. And by doing that, I train my bosses, absolutely train my bosses, in how they can empower me. If you give me 2 monitors, I can transition between. Don't ask me to flip between. By the time I flip to the other screen, I have lost my focus because I've focused on how to flip between that screen.
Okay.
Those are things that will affect you.
This is clicking with me as you say that.
And I can focus on the
So
task.
I was recently watching an MVP event that was presented by a person with autism.
Yes.
And he was talking about how he was a more effective coder because of his mental process.
Yes.
Because of his tendency, the way that his brain processed information. Is this an asset?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I'm on the spectrum too. I was a child that grew up in a very rural area that they didn't have the diagnosis to say. I just knew my brain was weird. I didn't know that it was ADHD. I didn't know that it was autism. And it's very normal for a lot of women, because our brain, our left-right hemispheres connect a little differently, that we're not diagnosed. Very little. It's considered more of a male tendency, ADHD, than women. If I'm stuck on a problem, I'm not getting through it, I'll go walk, and I'll come back and I have the answer.
It's awesome that you understand how to embrace that and make it work for you.
My bosses are great because they're willing to give me, I guess, they're willing to give me the benefit of the doubt to realize that allow me to benefit, or allow me to empower myself. That I will tell my boss, just give me as many tasks as you possibly can. Give me everything on the list, load up my plate, and I'll just start working through it. And I will. I handle an incredible workload, and I know it. But it's making sure I have enough on my plate. I also know to match myself up with somebody else that's extremely meticulous and goes through and wants everything dotted, all the I's and T's. There's a reason I do that. Because I'm really good at getting all the way through the 95% in miraculous time. And that last little 5% will take me forever. But if you get somebody meticulous, they'll come in and go, bop, and finish it for me.
Okay.
And then we match up very well. They may be meticulous and not be able to get through things. I can handle the big workload. I'm the workhorse.
Excellent. Thank you. Somebody wants some attention.